Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm joined by Theo and Jack, the lazy forger, singular. They are one person in two bodies.
Sort of.
Yeah, it's complicated.
And we're going to be talking about full spectrum dominance, the factions, a bit about their lore and playstyle and what makes them unique. So it's great to have you with us today.
Likewise.
So I think the best place to start is with the initial concepts.
Yes.
So the initial concept for full spectrum dominance itself and the first two factions.
Absolutely. So the first two factions, which are the yellow and the gray there, are the Tech and the Enlisted. And they were designed mostly following the rule of cool. We really wanted to do something like that. And we felt like that was a kind of design that I wanted to work on, for instance. And the lore around it developed while the design was developing as well. So we decided to go with a fairly sci-fi way of world building rather than the usual fantasy approach. So we defined what we needed for the factions, around the factions, and everything else crystallized as we went. So even now there are big holes in the lore itself, which is what doesn't actually talked about, what is actually not properly related to the existing factions, which will be completed as things are developed, things are designed.
Exactly. It was very, I'd say, bottom-up kind of lore development, starting from what we have, we create stuff for what we have, and then we will add above that, rather than we start creating the universe, deciding the rule of the universe, the history and everything, and then we pull that down to the factions.
Exactly. The baseline of the setting itself, the lore, it's very simple. The idea is that we are in a not extremely far future. There has been a bit of stellar exploration and expansion. We're accepting that there are enough habitable planets out there, otherwise it becomes a bit boring.
But there is not, that's important, faster than light travel.
That's true. There is no faster than light travel. The whole exploration took some time. Humans expanded. It's just humans for now. And at a certain point, the AI got into a singularity. It started getting self-consciousness, whatever, and there has been a big war. Doesn't matter what happened exactly. The Tech has been defeated. The big faction, the big enemy has been defeated. Evil. And at that point, you still have pockets of tech factions, of tech groups, each controlled by a central intelligence, trying to fight and looking for the meaning of life. They have named after philosophers.
When they find it.
Kill it, yes. That's the best part of finding life. And on the other hand, you have humans that once were like a huge interstellar civilization, and now they are mostly nations, multiple one in a planet if needs, and each of them have their own forces. So the idea of the two forces is a bit trope-based, in particular starting with the most vanilla one, but also the most useful one in a way, which is the Enlisted. So the design of the Enlisted is structured in a way that allows all kind of human forces to be played with it. So it has pretty much, it covers all the different kind of vehicles that a modern force would have. And in terms of support cards and character cards, it gives you the options for proper characterization of your force the way you want. In particular, I try to encourage people to also play modern with them. You can really make two different factions entirely just by getting a subset of what you have. You can remove heavy tanks on one side, you can remove, light infantry in the other, and you can just play with that, or like limit the infantry. And in general, it's the most versatile faction of the game right now. And even though it's one of the first two that came out in the first campaign, like a Frontier My Mini Factory campaign, sort of a Kickstarter. It was a huge success, and it was really motivating for us because we realized that very unexpected. We realized that that even though many people already had the models, the campaign itself went really well, and at least another 500 people joined in terms of like people who bought
not just the manual, but also
Then we get another similar number of people who just got the manual, and I'm sure they're enjoying playing with their own models, which is great. I really encourage people to use the models they have. That's what you build, that's what you painted, that's what you love. You don't need to buy new stuff. Of course, if you want to it's there. It's good for us, but you don't need to. Like, you can totally play with whatever.
The important thing is that people just play.
Yes,
what they have, that's the fun part, the neat part.
And we want people to be able to use our factions for whatever they have, so they can play with it. And the factions have to be not generic, but tropey enough to cover what you have, so you can use it and proxy it without it feeling awkward.
Okay,
yeah, exactly.
So the Enlisted are pretty much all ground forces then, infantry, tanks, a lot of wheeled vehicles in there as well.
Yes,
artillery type pieces is there.
As a design choice, I decided to not use tracks. So tracks are
so all the armored vehicles are all wheelies.
Yeah, exactly. Just to make something a bit more unique, because there are so many tracked human factions out there. Some are amazing models, even old LED models are really good. So I just wanted something a bit different that felt a bit fresh and that worked in terms of cohesive design.
Yeah, also because the overall look was of a normal sci-fi army. So to avoid being too much generic, the idea of not having trucks, but wheels to have it's a tank, but it's a wheeled tank.
Exactly. So the lore behind them is basically like all the human factions that remain, all the human nations that have an army will use that kind of stuff. We use that kind of vehicles. It's okay to change them. I've seen people just changing the turrets with other stuff they find online, or the bodies. Like, it really works well. It's really versatile. And it is the jack of all trades of full spectrum dominance.
Then the tech.
Yes.
The AI-based monstrosities that humanity has somehow managed to defeat.
They did, somehow, yes.
God bless humanity.
See, that was good.
People
reduce them.
But they're still there, exactly. So the idea is that the tech is now scattered in multiple, they're sort of philosophers. They're named after philosophers. So let's say school of thoughts, each of them controlled by a hive intelligence. One of them, actually, I modeled it as a stretch goal for the first campaign. And so people use it as a terrain or objective marker. And
that was, I think, the first model that was made after a lore-based story.
Exactly. We put out the lore, the design were there already, but that was something that had a name because the community designed the story behind them. So the idea is that, as I said before, the crystallization of lore around what exists is a healthy way for me to create a lore that is not too hard, not too fixed, but at the same time, not constricted, but at the same time follows some canon rules. And in that sense, we got people starting to play their games and adding backstory to them. Especially Ian Ross was a member of the community, and he went so much into that. He wrote so much of that, that right now the stories and the bits of lore in the manual are his. He's in the credits, and he did an amazing job. And we're sort of using him as a repository of knowledge for the
guardian of the lore.
Exactly, the guardian of the lore.
Guardian of the canon.
Actually, it could be the new title for the credits. So with that said, the setting itself is kind of free, but at the same time, there is a backstory for each that gives character, which is what we wanted in the first place for the lore.
So how then do the tech actually function on the tabletop then?
Right. So unlike the Enlisted, which should represent all the dynamics of basically modern warfare, because at the end of the day, we are in a not too far future, and things sort of remain a bit retro in that sense.
Sure.
The tech have a different play style. They have mechs. They are the only faction until the new ones that actually rely on mechs heavily. And those mechs can jump, they can punch, they can unleash more weaponry than usual, but at the same time, they don't have the fast infantry, the blitzkrieg sort of transports that the Enlisted have. So they have, in average, a bit more defense, a bit more damage. They're a bit more slow, and they control the table in a different way. Also, they can deep deploy troops, while the Enlisted can deploy scouts, which is they have a lot of nice mechanics on their own. The troops on the other side is more like different kind of spider droids, and that's the first time where you can actually choose which kind of troop to deploy. You have to buy the troop anyways, and then you can deploy troop around, control the table that way, jump with some stuff, and then use the rest as a slow but hard to kill force.
Different kind of flexibility.
Exactly. Very flexible, but not to represent humans, more to have different strategies with a more jumpy and dynamic force.
Okay, so those are the initial two factions, two concepts within the game, and from there you progressed to the Conglomerate and the Union.
Yes, after those two were completed and the campaign was successful and motivated us to like, whoa, okay, there is an interest for more factions. Like people are actually playing the game and enjoying it. We started getting a lot more battle reports, people interacting. It's basically a part-time job just interacting with the community, and I love it. And there's so many people very positive too in the whole spirit of an indie game that it is technically kind of tight in terms of rules. It could be a tournament game, but it isn't. And the result is like, rule-wise it could be, I'm saying.
Yeah.
But the result is that people are really trying out new stuff, and we started laying down the factions, laying down the rules for the new factions. So people were testing it even before the models were out.
Yeah.
And the two new factions are the Conglomerate and the Union, which is the white and the reds. And well, we can start talking about the Conglomerate.
Yeah.
So we were saying before that the humanity forces have been scattered around. So we're not we're not talking about one specific force. We're just saying like human forces have that kind of battle strategies. There are new forces which are like corporations, conglomerates.
The megacorps.
The megacorps, exactly, that have their own kind of forces. So the idea is that they have higher quality guns, but the fabrication of everything is
more mass-produced, more
which means cheaper and a bit weaker, but they can have flyers because the other faction didn't have flyers. We wanted to put some flyers in.
Of course.
And infantry is a bit scarcer.
They're more of a glass cannon, long range, dealing a lot of damage but low defense, and
area control. The ability of dropping the drop pods that go around in the table, they act a bit like totems. They just control the table. There is the whole dynamic, the whole mechanic actually in the faction of observing. So you can observe with the drop pods, you can observe with infantry, with
the scout
few vehicles,
mechs,
exactly, or the scout mechs, and all of them give you an advantage to hit, which makes the cannons even more lethal, but it's about observing the right point at the right time, which again is about area control
it's a sort of sniper and spotter dynamic.
Exactly.
Their gameplay.
So the gameplay of them is like that. The flyers, it's worth noting that there is not a lot of flying units in full spectrum dominance in general, and that's because actually flying units are there, but they're not on the
side
table.
Of the map. Yeah,
it is a combined arm game, but it is also a skirmish game. So you don't want to have a jet fighter in the middle of the table, which is supposed to be there for like 0.2 seconds.
Yeah,
that happens outside. You play cards for that, and that's how you get the combined arms feel.
Yeah,
these are basically hovercrafts or like hovering ships,
like helicopter kind of.
Basically, exactly, helicopters. Even the flying one from the tech is not much different. They just stay there. Maybe they have a bit of a aerodynamic shape, but that's because maybe they're very fast when they come there.
Yeah.
But the fight itself, they can stand still and shoot all of them. If you want to have proper airplanes, you're going to have them abstracted into support cards. And that's how...
Makes a lot of sense whenever you're playing the game, though, because it's one of the big problems with any war game. The minute you add in something like aircraft or even long-range artillery, and you really should never see artillery on a board, because they should be aiming at something 2 or 3 miles away.
Exactly. And even in scale, 2-3 miles means like at least the building after the one next to you. Something like that.
So it's a nice way of doing it. And having a more versatile hoverer, whether it's for a gun platform or
basically, or a transport.
Transport.
Because at that point, having a fine transport, it makes sense. It gives you a strategic advantage. You can go through terrain. Instead,
you can deploy behind the enemy lines.
You can do that.
Close to the objectives.
But you're also more visible. You can get taken down easily. Again, glass cannons. So it works in that.
The Union.
Yeah, the Union, they are definitely not a glass cannon from the looks of things.
They are not made of glass.
No.
So these three factions, especially the two human factions so far, had a bit of a generic lore to cover all the scattered kind of humans that would exist in most sci-fi settings in general. In the case of the Union, well, it all started because I saw too many construction vehicles around that were really looking cool. Like they really felt like, okay, you put a gun in that and it becomes an amazing war machine. Doesn't matter. And I really wanted to represent that. And the lore behind it became that just like there were nations, just like there were humans working in proper functioning societies, there were plenty of factories, like huge factories. When you expand in multiple planets, the first thing you do is you build amazingly huge factories, which become basically cities. Okay. When the diaspora happened, when the whole war happened, those factories stopped being controlled by a central government. They started producing stuff for themselves. They started trying to survive. You can extract as much gold as you want, but you also need bread or potatoes, I guess. And they did that. So the Union is the representation of like unionized factory workers from factory cities. And they have lots of manpower. They rely a lot on melee, but not as much as one would think for a horde-like army.
Okay. Yeah, they're not orcs.
They're not orcs. They're not tyrants.
Mindlessly against the...
They are humans. They really don't like the idea of being killed, but in many cases they don't have enough guns for everyone.
Okay, so they have to rely on essentially repurposed engineering equipment.
That's correct.
Yeah. Diggers and scoops and drills and that sort of thing.
They just added some weapons to what they had.
Some machinery has guns, some kept the arm, the working part, and they use that to also dismantle the
enemies.
The enemy.
Yeah. And in terms of gameplay, the idea is that, sure, they have melee. They do get close to opponents, and they deal exceptionally high damage when that happens.
Especially their infantry.
Especially their, not just, like a bit of everyone has some sort of plays. It's pretty good. But
the infantry did a lot of damage to me during the test run.
Yeah, we had some games where some of these tiny guys destroyed the big one, and it was pretty amazing. So yes,
you've still not recovered from that.
No,
he still suffers a bit.
Of course.
But the idea is that the way to get close is not to just soak a lot of damage until you get there, is to use the support cards as much as you can.
Okay.
And the support cards of that faction, while the support cards of the Enlisted, for instance, are as various as possible to represent the kind of remote support modern armies get. When you are in a factory city, you don't get a lot of that kind of support. So what you get with the support cards here is, and with the characters too, is more of a thematic, almost emulative approach to the gameplay. So you get like a double shift that allows your troops to move a bit more. You get the alarm siren, which gives like a bit of a charge in some cases, or another attack in case.
They need to have the Union representative among them.
The Union representative is mandatory for all factions, which takes quite a bit of points, but it basically gives you outside help, and you can use it as a character on a vehicle, or you can use it as a support, because it can be on the table or out the table. Choices.
Yeah, bring the shop steward with you.
Exactly. But you have to pay for it. So it is somewhat of a limit there. All in all, the strategy is a bit more like it's a bit less of a vanilla faction compared, for instance, to the Enlisted. But
also the tech, I'd say, because the first two factions were developed in a way that, okay, we are developing the game, let's make faction that works with the game. The second two were like, okay, we want to do new faction, we have the design, we have to make them interesting. They could not just be tweaking the numbers of the existing faction. They have to need interesting dynamics and interesting gameplay, just not to be just one redesign of an existing faction.
But at the same time, the tricky thing is being able to do new factions that have the quirk, but at the same time that they can be used in multiple ways. If you can just play one way, that's a bit of a limit. It can be fun, sure, but
the
you might want to
value can
or also quickly. Like maybe you want to use that faction, especially if you're proxying it. Maybe you want to use it to represent something that doesn't actually work that way. You want to be able to have a bit of a range in that. So, for instance, we were talking about the Union. They don't have good cannons, but they have really big cannons. So you can decide to go on the heavy side, you can decide to go on the infantry side. Most of the tanks have a transportability, so you can actually transport infantry where you want. It is strategic.
Yeah, it's always nice being able to play multiple play styles within a faction as well.
Necessary.
Yeah, again, as with the lore, also the playstyle tend to be quite low, tropey more than very descriptive.
Yeah. Which is nice. Now, that brings us to the two newest factions for the upcoming campaign. Depending on when you see this, may even be live.
It could be.
So the Corsairs and the Reclaimed, as is demonstrative of your shirt, are a delightfully chunky concrete boy.
They're chunky, they're cute.
They're very cute.
They are the cutest faction so far, possibly. We'd really like to push the cute into everything here. We're not taking ourselves too seriously in that. The idea is that we just want to have stuff that looks nice, especially this tiny. You want to have a bit of a spot, a bit of a moment where you actually see the things and you can recognize them rather than just being badass.
Yeah. So and we want to have fun sculpting them as well.
And we do that too, absolutely. It becomes very boring otherwise. So the new campaign in general, the new so-called third wave, it's a campaign that is coming out potentially live already in October 3rd. And I wanted to move a bit away from, like, it has always been, Full Spectrum Dominance has always been a combined arms skirmish game. So you're playing with all kind of stuff, but it's still a skirmish. This is more of a skirmish and a bit less of a combined arms. So the new two factions play a bit more like a proper skirmish. Like, you can see that the size of the models is a bit closer to what a 28mm game would be. They still have some small stuff. There is even some infantry if you want to, but some people don't like to paint 6mm infantry. They still want to play with their friends who love that. So this will make the game more accessible. And also, I wanted to experiment with some dynamics that I was working on in the last few years, and I wanted to implement them. So that's two different takes on what a proper skirmish faction would look in Full Spectrum Dominance. So starting with the Reclaimed, we're talking about the unions and the factory cities. There were many kind of factory cities. Some unionized, some became properly like that. Other had fewer humans, and they started to instead rely on scavenged tech cores, like sentient cores that tech left around. Like, a lot of them were destroyed during the wars and whatever. You got plenty of them. You just have to reprogram them. Not easy.
In a way that don't kill yourself.
Yeah, exactly. That's the non-easy part. Otherwise, you can do that, but you won't do much else.
A little bit aggressive.
Giving an AI a tech lobotomy.
Yeah, exactly.
You work for me now.
I'm actually figuring it out with, like, the programmer with the tech core and like 6 guns pointed at the thing.
Around it, yeah.
And it's like, as soon as he lifts a finger, like, destroy that, and the programmer doesn't matter. Let's just contain it. Let's just contain it. So what happens is that they reuse the tech cores. They have the ability to finally do some proper unmanned robots, but they don't have the facility to produce the armor itself. So they make it in concrete and rebars.
Because
it's
that's
a factory.
What they have in a factory.
Yeah, it's a factory. They have concrete, of course. So that's what they do. And you end up with these chunky robots that are heavier than they look. They're bigger than, like, and scarier than they actually are. But at the end of the day, they're also packing a lot of damage. The gameplay is tricky because they're not just dealing damage, they are constantly being repaired and supported by so-called wardens. In this case, I have here some small wardens that are like robots, but then there are even smaller ones.
The infantry could be a warden.
There are also even smaller wardens, which are humans, and they're still in the works. They're going to be painted soon, and they will be out in pictures. And the whole system of the strategy of the faction is that you need wardens to be in the right spot at the right time to allow for bigger stuff to do their thing. So you need to move them. They're not properly units. They don't shoot. They don't do stuff. They repair. They jump in front of bullets. Some of them actually shoot, but in a very non-stateful way. So they're not units. They just are more like tokens moving around. And then you have your proper troops, which is maybe 5, 6, 7 of them in a whole army. And those are the actually acting units that will pack the punch.
Okay. So with the Reclaim then, so the larger things like the Trolls and the Cyclops rely on wardens to shepherd them into place and to give them the resources they need to function.
Basically that. You can play without them because there's going to be some Cyclops, some Trolls that have no weapons and work as wardens too. So you can save some money, have them, and play a bit of a combo-y situation there. There's going to be a bigger Centaur, which is going to be really big. I have some designs printed already, but it's not entirely completed, so it's not here yet. And that's going to be more or less the faction. Again, you can play in very different ways. You can play more of a big robots repairing themselves sort of situation, because you always have a warden with you because you are the warden.
Yeah.
Or you can have hordes of infantry. You can have
hordes of unarmed cyclops that can
exactly.
at some point explode in the face of the enemy.
Absolutely. Like they're sort of
walking claymores.
Disposable. Yeah. And there are the way the support cards work in this case is it's not about the storytelling like the Union, it's more about the kind of things you can do with what you have on the table. So you have cards that allow any Cyclope or any troll to do something, and that gives more character to the units, but at the same time it's not on their card, which means that the way you decide to play, you can decide to play heavily on that kind of side. So your units are going to cost them the same, but you're going to invest more points into that kind of supports, and that gives more power to the unit itself. Or you can put more units, or you can put different kind of units. So a bit of variety in that sense.
And even more variety with the Corsairs.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me about the Corsairs, because they are a fascinating mech-based affair.
Yes, the Corsair itself is a bit on the other side of the spectrum compared to the full spectrum.
Of the full spectrum, yeah.
Compared to to Reclaim, because they're not unmanned. They are piloted by humans.
And they're not low-tech at all.
They're absolutely not low-tech, and their humans are living off-planet. The idea is that the so-called Corsairs are what they say, so they are sort of mercenary, but working for one flag usually. So they're basically a different faction entirely, but you can give them a background that really depends on the interest behind them.
Yeah, you can make your own pirate band, Corsair band.
Exactly, your pirate band, you can give it a motive that can be different. And they're few, they're not many people. They each have a very expensive rig. They have some support flyers around, but mostly you're going to play with a handful of them, maybe 5, 6 of them for a full army, which is not a lot.
Yeah.
Each of them will pack a punch for sure. Some of them are kind of small and they behave a bit like, they're all mechs of course, but they behave a bit like tanks in terms of like controlling or whatever.
Yeah.
But then you have bigger ones that can be personalized quite a lot. So first of all, they're magnetized. So all the weapons can be removed and put back in, or you can glue them in, doesn't matter. But you can really personalize them the way you want them to play. And the weapon itself is a different card. So you're going to have cards attached to the main mechs in a way that is more close to what the behemoths now do. So each of them is going to be properly a war machine.
And
each of them,
the weapon may cost way more than the actual rig in
absolutely.
many cases.
Like you can have a wide range of costs depending on how you equip your machines.
The loadout is very important on the Corsairs.
And it's also very dice hungry.
Yeah.
So you will end up spending a lot of dice potentially in just one mech for one round. It's all about dice economics. It's all about controlling the table. You have very powerful stuff. It's very hard to kill. They have this thing where if they get killed, that hit, they will roll twice on the damage charge and decide which die to use, which makes them very good at soaking damage.
Yeah, they can spread incoming damage around a lot and keep themselves functioning for longer. They may be a smoking pile, but
they will be a smoking pile, yes.
But they'll still be functioning.
The problem is they're not many. So if you want to take control of objective, if you want to properly play the game, because it's not just about killing the opponent, it's about playing scenarios and getting objectives, it's not going to be easy. So they're not an easy faction to play. Neither of the new factions are like a super easy level.
Sure.
Because they both have an extra layer of strategy. In one case, it's the wardens. In one case, like the controlling of the repairee bots that help you do what you have to do. On the other side, it's just about like dice economics, deciding the right action at the right point, not losing the right kind of weapon. Otherwise, it's all about maintaining what you have. They're not fragile, but they are few.
Okay.
And you have to strategize for the next round, what kind of dice you have to load to use that dice in the next round.
It does take a bit of planning, yes.
Yeah.
There is some strategizing, some tactical, so on the time part, not only on the 3D part.
Absolutely, yeah. There is all sides require a bit of care.
Yeah.
It's nice that the new campaign, since it's more focused on like bigger stuff a bit, the terrain that goes with it, which are like these buildings, a lot more stuff is coming, but the core is going to be the buildings, which are modular. You can build any shape of them. Well, almost any shape. And there are currently like 20 different parts. It's going to be far more by the time the campaign starts.
Okay.
And all of that works well with this because they're big stuff for big troops.
Yeah, after the 2 years, I guess, of tanks and shanty house and
It's been 5.
post-apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic environment, we really wanted to do mechs and big buildings.
It was time for that.
Yeah.
And if someone
destroyed
wants to play,
cities and mechs fighting,
and if
more
someone wants to
battletech-y.
play to like exactly, if someone wants to play with their own mechs, the rules are pretty elastic. Like you can choose your weapon, you can choose your shape, so you can properly test. Even if you're playing BattleTech, if you're playing whatever other mech game, you can just get a manual and try it out with your models. It should work really well. It's a nice way to introduce people who are curious about the different approach to the gameplay, even using the same models. It would work.
And especially with the Corsairs then, and like you say, because they've got the diversity within list building with the weapons. They're not just a standard unit from some of the other factions where the card tells you everything they have on it. You've got that chopping and changing ability. It means if you are going to be using other models from other ranges, then you can just spec in the relevant bits and pieces. You just look at it and go, well, that's the equivalent of a whatever happens to be.
Or you can make up a new weapon. It's just going to be the weapon. Or you can make up a new body for the same weapon. It's more modular. It allows you for more customization without properly breaking the game, without rewriting the whole thing, which is useful.
Now, you did mention a larger model for the Reclaimed. Is that as big as a Behemoth?
It's going to be slightly smaller than a Behemoth, but it also means that you can actually field a couple of them in a faction, and it still works. The one for the Corsairs is going to be. I really wanted to put it in a smaller base, so I really wanted to put it within a 6 centimeter base, like basically that one, 5 centimeter base. I managed to, but all the feet are out. I'm just saying, it's kind of big. It's actually, if you look at it from distance, it's going to be as big as the Behemoths, really, and it has 4 sockets for 4 different weapons. So again, you can probably pack more than half an army just in that thing. Or you can just put it cheaper weapons or whatever and use it in a more functional way. All in all, we wanted to have a wow factor for both factions, something a bit big that looks cool, but it's also playable. The problem now is that with Behemoths, they are playable, but they require specific scenarios because otherwise the whole dynamics kind of change too much. In this case, since everything was already sort of big, we didn't want to get to the Behemoth size. Slightly smaller, but usable. And a bit like the small Behemoths, which are present on the table.
Yeah, this one
and there's one there.
And that's one, that are actually more usable than the
they're
big
like 20 points each, so that's understandable. Like you can actually get to this thing to get to that cost if you really put expensive stuff on it. So all in all, the idea is that to have something that is in between, that is more playable, and that still works as a centerpiece for the faction. Still in the works. Both of them are like 60-70% done. By the start of the campaign, they're going to be painted and showcase,
ready to go. Which is nice then that it's not just a case of every faction must have a Behemoth. It's every faction that has got something that's a centerpiece but might work in a slightly different way, and maybe you can have multiples of them, and it changes up the dynamics again. Because I really like the asymmetry of some of the factions as you've gone on and developed it. You see from the Enlisted at the start being that very functional, a lot of bodies on the table, through to the Conglomerate being a bit more, well, we've got the money for big guns and maybe we don't have as many men running about to actually do, down to the, here's our budget, here's our tech from Wish. We've got
that's a great definition.
AI cores, and we've stuck them into concrete, and off they go.
Or from Home Depot, maybe.
So they go off and they do their job, but they're all, gameplay-wise, that they're going to feel very different for people to pick up and play. And the rules and cards for all of them will be available online anyway, so people can then start experimenting and list building.
Absolutely.
Yeah, actually,
we even have an online builder. Just the builder itself, which I coded myself, and it doesn't have the new factions yet. It's gonna need a few tweaks for that, but it already allows you to play with the factions, like show, like take a screenshot, put a link, show the link. Either ways, it's going to work for people who want to do the meta thing and become...
Especially with the newer and then the newest faction, we sort of wanted to, give a distinct gameplay, give distinct visual, and so have a very different approach to the starting one. They were way more vanilla. At the beginning, we had the gray cars that were supposed to be universal car for each factions. And then we just like standard main battle tank, standard infantry. Then we scrapped that idea after, I don't remember which version, but quite early, because we wanted to give more flavor to the gameplay of each faction. There are some residual parts that some, like the enlisted walkers and the tech transport that are
they had to be there, so they remained. But for instance, the transport is a good example that before the transport was one for all of them, and it kind of made it that every single faction could do a blitzkrieg at the first round. Now the transport is present in only some factions. For instance, comparing the first two, if that's simple, the transport of the tech exists, but the deploy is not free. And that makes it that with that slight difference, also all the other values are a bit different, but the other values are just because it should represent more techie things. Aside from that, the deploy itself takes some dice.
So you cannot blitz into the objective like you can do with the infantry of the enlisted.
It's much more expensive because it is the infantry itself is more expensive. Then you have to use an activation die. Not the best thing. Regarding the new factions, there is a bigger change of there is a whole shift in the idea, and it's also represented. It's silly, but it's represented by the fact that the bases of the new factions, the basing, has been done with a different color. Like the previous thing, the first 4 factions were definitely set in the deserty wasteland planet with factory cities and stuff. Here we are a bit more like, okay, the game is the same. It really works well together. We already had quite a few tests of mixed battles with mixed results, which is what we wanted, basically. But now let's focus a bit more on something different. Let's have mechs fighting in a city. Let's have a game that is a bit less combined arms, but still has it in case of future factions. There might be some that are actually humans, but we're going to try very hard to make a different play style of that while still making it interchangeable. Of course, the more factions you have, the harder it gets to balance them all.
And most importantly, we had a very cool gaming table that we use in the picture on the manual with that terrain, and so we wanted to have all the older miniatures go well with the terrain, and now we are working on a new gaming table, so it is time
to make a lot of gray backgrounds. Yes,
that's the way these things go. So it's been a very interesting view of how the game has expanded, how the factions have expanded as well. Very hard sci-fi is always fun, because in some respects it limits you to what is conceivable, I suppose. Without the hand waving of, we found ancient alien tech.
Both of us really don't like the fantasy in space approach to some kind of sci-fi.
Yeah, I think some of the miniature producers have that kind of approach. I don't remember which one, but there are some.
One or two out there.
Maybe a little one.
So, I mean, the grounding of it becomes both a limiting factor and then also an interesting mechanic that you have to work around when it comes to developing your factions, I suppose.
One big one, like the elephant in the room here, is that so far there are no aliens. Without faster than light travel, like intelligent aliens and all that stuff. Well, I mean, I'm not saying it's never going to happen, but intelligent aliens tends to be rare. Instead,
there are aliens, but not alien civilizations.
Exactly, when you are accepting the fact that, hey, we have the habitable planets. That's already a bit of a stretch, but we have habitable planets everywhere. At that point, there's going to be animals,
flora and fauna,
and just like Earth had monsters around for the last 400 million years. more or less.
Yep.
You want to have something similar there. So we are actually already working on a pretty nice bugs, but more like crabs faction. So it's going to be crab hunting instead of the usual bug hunting.
Yeah, bugs were
kind of,
way too cliche already.
At this point, it's a bit overused, yes. And so there's going to be actually coming later this year, next year, who knows, solo mode. It's been tested already. There's been at least 30, 40 games played in the community. It's like there's a lot of people doing really good job here to help with this, and they're enjoying it because they get to play it before the others. And the solo mode is going to be a very different kind of gameplay because it's not just like, oh, you're going to move the other faction with some rules. The other faction is going to be a different faction. It's going to be a horde, a hive.
It will be a horde defense.
A swarm.
Swarm defense.
Swarm of crabs.
And it's going to be crabs. It's going to be also robots. The idea is that the so-called detached are going to be basically tech robots that lost the contact with the hive with a central intelligence. And what happens is that they will shamble towards you. So in both cases, you're going to have the opponent having less strategy, but you have to play the opponent in the way that is more convenient to you.
Okay.
So you will try to beat the game.
It's way easier to see it than to explain
Yes.
it. The automation part.
The automation actually really works
very well, but to explain it is...
it's not easy, yeah.
It's not easy.
The whole idea is that you are actually playing to win. So even the choices you make for the opponent, it's going to be always like choosing the least bad between two, something like that.
Okay.
So
there is some good strategy in that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Very,
and there's going to
good.
be crabs and there's going to be broken robots.
Well, if people want to get involved then with the likes of playing around with some of the new factions, checking those out, where's the best place for them to go to?
So I would really recommend people to join us on Discord because our Discord is really active right now. Facebook group is really good too. Otherwise, I don't know, we are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, but mostly those two. In general, I really encourage people to do their custom stuff. It's fun, it's nice. Post your own models, even if it's not these models, it's really fun.
Make your own lore for your own faction of Enlisted.
And if you do that, you might even want to contribute to the current wiki we're working on, which is like a lore repository, which is open source. It's on GitHub. I mean, I'm going to say no if someone talks about flying monsters in
we have,
space, or maybe we will accept it. We don't know.
We have our lore custodian.
The lore custodian, which is Ian Ross. And other than that, in general, everything that makes sense, since the game is set in multiple systems that are not really connected, just make your own system, make your own planet, make your own
All
area
of those
of
factions could live in the same planet.
They will live. They do
planets
live
are not like
probably.
one biome planet, like in another setting.
Some settings have that, yes.
So you can have a planet when you have a factory city that has became unionized, and on the other side of the planet you still have a nation with a proper army
or
fighting.
50 kilometers ahead.
Or 50 kilometers ahead.
There are planets that even have desert and streets.
Yeah.
The same planet.
It's weird. With plants.
It will never catch on.
Yeah.
Different color of plants in different part of the planet.
That's
unthinkable.
very weird.
Yes.
Fantasy is so weird.
Yeah, right?
Imagine the possibilities, more than one biomes.
I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes next. And if you want to find out more, we'll drop the links for the Discord and the like below. If you have any questions for the guys about full spectrum dominance or about any of the factions in particular, please drop them in.
I will be there. I will be there checking every single comment, yes.
Every single hour.
That's what I like to hear. Until next time, bye-bye.
Go ahead and check out our other content on screen now. And while you're at it, why not hit subscribe and remember to ding our dong. Go on, you know you want to click it. Go on.